Miriam sat behind the counter of her mini provision store, staring blankly at the street outside. Business was slow today, but that wasn't what bothered her. Her mind was lost in thoughts about her life, her marriage, and the future she once saw so clearly. She had agreed to marry Dyke because she believed in his dreams. He was the brightest student back in school, and when he proposed after their national youth service, she had said yes without hesitation. But now, she didn't know what she was seeing anymore. Dyke had everything it took to succeed: intelligence, determination, and a first-class degree in petrochemical engineering. But in their country, talent and hard work weren't enough. Jobs went to those who had connections, not those who had the best results. Despite his efforts, every company he applied to either ignored his application or told him they had no openings. The frustration was heavy, but Dyke refused to break. Instead of waiting endlessly for a job that might never come, Dyke decided to make use of what he had. His father was a carpenter, and growing up, he had learned a lot from him. Without hesitation, he started a small carpentry business, making furniture and fixing broken chairs. From the money he made, he set up this provision store for Miriam. At first, she was angry. This was not the life they had planned. They were supposed to be living in a big city, enjoying the rewards of their education. But as time passed, she saw the wisdom in his decision. Dyke was always 3 steps ahead of her, and 10 steps ahead of life. He never let failure hold him back. He believed that one day, his time would come. His certificate would matter, and all their struggles would be over. But how long would they have to wait? Miriam sighed and looked at the items on her shelf. The same customers came every day, buying the same things. But there was something about her shop that attracted more men than women. It wasn't the biscuits or the beverages she sold. It was her beauty. Neighbors often joked that she was the reason men left big supermarkets to come and buy from her. Some would stand longer than necessary, pretending to check prices while stealing glances at her. Others tried to flirt, offering her money and gifts, but she always turned them down. She loved Dyke too much to even consider it. That was until Ndubuisi walked into her life. It was a hot afternoon when she saw him for the first time. A black SUV pulled up in front of her store, and a well-dressed young man stepped out. He was tall, clean-shaven, and had an air of confidence around him. His designer perfume filled the air as he approached her. "Good afternoon, beautiful," he said with a charming smile. Miriam nodded politely. "Good afternoon, sir. What would you like to buy?" Ndubuisi didn't reply immediately. Instead, he looked around the shop before his eyes settled back on her. "I must say, your beauty is the first thing that caught my attention. I was driving by, but I had to stop." Miriam felt uneasy. She had heard such lines before. "Thank you," she said shortly. "What do you want to buy?" Ndubuisi chuckled and picked up a few items, things she was sure he didn't need. When she told him the price, he paid double and told her to keep the change. "Have a nice day, Miriam," he said before walking back to his car. Miriam froze. She had never told him her name. How did he know? She watched as his car disappeared down the road. For the first time since she got married, a man other than her husband had left an impression on her. And she didn't know why that scared her. Miriam couldn't get Ndubuisi out of her mind. It wasn't just his looks or his wealth. It was the confidence in his voice, the way he carried himself like a man who had never known struggle. She shook her head and focused on her business. She was a married woman, and Dyke was a good man. There was no reason for her to entertain any thoughts about another man. But just when she thought she had put him out of her mind, he came back. 2 days later, the black SUV pulled up in front of her shop again. Ndubuisi stepped out, dressed in another expensive suit, smelling of expensive cologne. This time, he didn't bother picking up any items. He walked straight to her counter and smiled. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, Miriam." Miriam's heart skipped a beat. "Sir, please, I am a married woman." "I know," Ndubuisi said smoothly. "I just want to be your friend." Miriam shook her head. "I don't think my husband would like that." Ndubuisi chuckled. "You are a strong woman, I respect that. But there's nothing wrong with friendship, is there?" Miriam knew this was dangerous. Every part of her told her to end this conversation, but she found herself hesitating. He was persistent, but not in an aggressive way. He made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She shook her head again, trying to clear her thoughts. I don't think it's a good idea. Ndubuisi smiled knowingly. All right, I respect your decision. He turned to leave but then paused. At least give me your number, just in case you ever need help. Miriam hesitated again, but before she knew it, she had given him her number. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept telling herself she had done nothing wrong. It was just a number, but deep down, she knew she had opened a door she wasn't sure she could close. The next morning, Ndubuisi sent her a message. Good morning, beautiful. I hope you slept well. She stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. But the temptation had already begun. Miriam told herself she wouldn't respond to Ndubuisi's messages. She deleted the first one without replying, and when he sent another the next day, she ignored it. But he didn't stop. Every morning, every evening, a simple text would come. Hope your day went well. How is business today? I just thought of you. At first she resisted, but slowly something changed. She found herself looking forward to his messages. She told herself it was harmless, just friendly conversation. When she finally replied, it was just a simple, good morning, I'm fine, thank you. But that was all Ndubuisi needed. He didn't rush her, he played his game well. Every day he would stop by the shop, buy things he didn't need, overpay, and smile at her in a way that made her stomach tighten. He never asked for anything in return. He never mentioned friendship again. He was just there, showing up, making her feel special. Miriam told herself she was in control. She loved Dyke. She would never cheat. But deep down, she knew she was playing with fire. One afternoon, Ndubuisi arrived as usual, but this time he didn't buy anything. I want to show you something, he said, leaning on the counter. I'm setting up a new company, and I'd love for you to see it. Miriam hesitated. She had never gone anywhere with him before, but there was something about the way he asked, calm, confident, like he already knew she would say yes. She picked up her phone and called Dyke. Honey, I'm stepping out for a bit. One of my customers wants to show me something. Dyke didn't ask questions. He trusted her. All right, be safe. That trust made her stomach churn, but she pushed the guilt away. Ndubuisi's company was impressive. A large building still under construction, workers moving everywhere. As he led her through the site, he asked her about her life, her dreams, and finally about Dyke. He was one of the best students in our set, Miriam said with pride. But no job came, so he started carpentry. Ndubuisi raised an eyebrow. A first-class graduate doing carpentry? Miriam nodded. Life is not fair. Ndubuisi was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll see what I can do for him. Miriam was so overwhelmed with gratitude that she hugged him tightly. It was a simple hug, but the moment her body pressed against his, something shifted. She pulled away quickly, but the damage was done. Ndubuisi's eyes darkened, and Miriam felt her heart pound. She knew she should walk away, she should end this now. But she didn't. Miriam tried to act normal after that day, but she knew something had changed. She felt it in the way Ndubuisi looked at her, in the way her body reacted when he was close. She told herself she was strong, that she could control the situation. But she was wrong. Ndubuisi didn't rush her. He didn't bring up the hug, and he never pressured her. Instead, he continued being the perfect gentleman, visiting her shop, overpaying, sending her thoughtful messages. And then, one afternoon, he invited her to lunch. Miriam hesitated, but she told herself it was innocent. Just a meal. She had done nothing wrong. When she arrived at his house, she was surprised at how well he had prepared. The dining table was neatly arranged, the food smelled delicious, and soft music played in the background. I cooked, Ndubuisi said with a smile. I hope you like it. Miriam laughed. You? You don't look like someone who enters the kitchen. Ndubuisi grinned. For you, I'll do anything. Miriam's stomach flipped, but she forced herself to ignore it. She sat down, and they ate while talking about life, dreams, and everything in between. Then, as she was about to leave, Ndubuisi touched her hand. Miriam, he said softly. She froze. I know you're married, he continued, but I can't lie to you. I want you. Miriam's heart pounded. She snatched her hand away. Ndubuisi, please, I love my husband. Ndubuisi didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded and smiled. I understand, but if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. Miriam rushed out of the house, breathing heavily. She knew she should never see him again. She knew she had come too close to danger, but later that night, as she lay in bed beside Dyke, Her phone vibrated. Ndubuisi, I just wanted to say good night. I haven't stopped thinking about you. Miriam stared at the message. She should delete it. She should block him. But instead, she smiled and replied. Miriam knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't stop herself. The texts became more frequent, the conversations longer. She told herself it was harmless, just words. But deep down, she knew the truth. One afternoon, Ndubuisi came to her shop again, but this time, he didn't stay long. I have something special planned for you, he said with a smile. Come to my house tomorrow. Miriam shook her head. Ndubuisi, this has to stop. I'm not forcing you, he interrupted gently. But if you come, I'll be waiting. That night, she couldn't sleep. Dyke lay beside her, peaceful and trusting. She should have been content. She should have been grateful. But all she could think about was Ndubuisi. The next afternoon, she made her decision. She told herself she was just going to talk to him to set things straight, but the moment she stepped into his house, she knew there was no turning back. The house smelled of his cologne, and soft music played in the background. He had set up a beautiful meal, just like before. Miriam swallowed hard. I shouldn't be here. But you are, Ndubuisi said softly, stepping closer. She felt his warmth, his breath against her skin. Her mind screamed at her to leave, to run, but her body betrayed her. One moment they were talking. The next, his lips were on hers, and she didn't push him away. Clothes fell to the floor, and before she could think, she had done the one thing she swore she would never do. When it was over, Miriam lay in silence, staring at the ceiling. Shame flooded her. She had betrayed Dyke. I should go, she whispered, sitting up. Ndubuisi gently pulled her back. You don't have to feel guilty. But she did. More than she had ever felt in her life. As she left his house, she told herself it would never happen again. But deep down, she wasn't so sure. Miriam avoided Ndubuisi for days. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror without feeling disgusted. Every time Dyke smiled at her, every time he held her close, guilt choked her. But Ndubuisi didn't give up. He didn't pressure her, didn't demand anything. He simply sent messages, always gentle, always understanding. I miss you. I can't stop thinking about you. I wish I could see you again. Miriam ignored him at first, but the guilt turned into something else, longing. She missed the attention, the thrill, the way Ndubuisi made her feel like the most important woman in the world. One evening, he sent a different kind of message. I have a job for Dyke. Miriam's heart pounded. A good job, one he deserves. I know people. I can make it happen. She hesitated. She knew what this meant. Nothing in life was free. But she also knew what Dyke wanted more than anything. She picked up her phone and dialed Ndubuisi's number. I'll meet you, she whispered. Ndubuisi kept his promise. Within a week, Dyke received a call from a top oil company. The interview was just a formality. By the next month, he had a well-paying job, a new apartment, and an official car. Dyke was overwhelmed with joy. He hugged Miriam tightly. This is all because of you, he said. You've always believed in me. Miriam forced a smile, but deep inside, she was drowning. Dyke wasted no time in showering her with love. Expensive clothes, jewelry, weekend getaways, he did everything to make her happy. But the more he tried, the more miserable she felt. Because she knew the truth. And so did Ndubuisi. One evening, she was in the bathroom when a message popped up on her phone. Dyke, lying on the bed, glanced at the screen. It was from Ndubuisi. And it changed everything. Miriam stepped out of the bathroom, wiping her face with a towel. She froze when she saw Dyke sitting on the bed, holding her phone. His face was blank, but his eyes burned with something dangerous. Who is Ndubuisi? He asked quietly. Miriam's heart pounded. He's just a customer, she stammered. Dyke turned the phone towards her. The screen was still lit, showing Ndubuisi's message. I miss you. I can't stop thinking about that afternoon. Silence filled the room, heavy, suffocating. Miriam's lips trembled. Dyke, I can explain. But he was already scrolling. His hands shook as he read message after message. Each one stabbed him deeper than the last. Miriam reached for the phone, but Dyke pulled away. His breathing was ragged. His chest rose and fell like a man fighting for air. How long? His voice was barely a whisper. Tears welled in Miriam's eyes. It was a mistake, she choked. I didn't mean to. How long, Miriam? His voice cracked, and that was what broke her. She fell to her knees. Just once, she sobbed. It was only once. Dyke let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Once? He threw the phone on the bed. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Miriam crawled to him, grabbing his hand. I swear, I love you. I only did it for you, for us. Dyke yanked his hand away as if her touch burned him, his jaw clenched. For us? His voice was ice. You slept with another man, for me? Miriam wiped her tears. I wanted to help you get the job. Dyke staggered back as if she had slapped him. So that's how I got it? His voice broke. Because my wife was warming another man's bed? Miriam sobbed harder. I didn't plan for it to happen. I swear. Ndubuisi, don't say his name. Dyke roared, his voice shaking the room. For the first time in her life, Miriam was afraid of him. Dyke stood there, breathing hard, his fists clenched. She could see the war inside him. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation. Then suddenly, he turned towards the door. Miriam scrambled to her feet. Dyke, please, don't leave. He paused. If I stay here, I might do something I'll regret. And with that, he walked out, slamming the door behind him. Miriam fell to the floor, sobbing. She had just lost the only man she had ever truly loved. Dyke didn't come home that night. Miriam called him over and over, but his phone was switched off. She barely slept, haunted by the look in his eyes before he left. She had broken him. By morning, she was a mess. Dark circles under her eyes, her body weak from crying. She sat in the living room, staring at the door, praying he would walk in. But he didn't. Instead, her phone rang. She grabbed it, hoping it was Dyke. But when she saw the name on the screen, her heart sank. Ndubuisi. She hesitated before answering. Hello? His voice was calm, almost amused. I heard your husband found out. Miriam swallowed hard. How did you? I have my ways, he chuckled. So, what now? Miriam's fingers clenched around the phone. Dyke left, she whispered. There was a pause. Then Ndubuisi said, Come to me. Miriam's breath caught. What? I can take care of you, Miriam. You don't have to suffer. Your husband may never forgive you, but I will. Miriam felt sick. I never wanted this. But you did, Ndubuisi said smoothly. You wanted the life I could give you, and I can still give you more. Miriam closed her eyes. I love Dyke. Ndubuisi laughed. If that were true, you wouldn't be in this mess. Tears slipped down her face. I made a mistake. You made a choice, he corrected. Now make another. Come to me. Miriam ended the call. She couldn't do this. Not again. That evening, Dyke finally came home. His face was tired, his eyes hollow. He didn't look at her as he walked past, heading straight to the bedroom. Miriam followed, her heart pounding. Dyke, please talk to me. He sat on the bed, rubbing his temples. I don't know if I can do this, Miriam. She dropped to her knees, gripping his hands. I love you. I swear. I'll do anything to make this right. Dyke looked at her then, his eyes filled with something she couldn't read. Did you ever love him? Miriam shook her head desperately. Never. It was always you. Dyke sighed, his shoulders slumping. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Miriam's chest tightened. Please don't leave me. He was silent for a long time. Then finally he spoke. I need time. Miriam's heart ached, but she nodded. She could only hope that time would be enough to fix what she had broken. Days passed. Then weeks. Dyke barely spoke to Miriam. He ate in silence, slept on the edge of the bed, and left the house early every morning. Miriam tried everything to fix things, cooking his favorite meals, apologizing over and over, even avoiding Ndubuisi completely. But nothing worked. One evening, Dyke walked in and placed an envelope on the table. Miriam's heart pounded. What is this? He didn't meet her eyes. A resignation letter. I quit the job. Miriam's breath hitched. Dyke, you don't have to do this. I do, he cut in. Every day I step into that office, I feel less of a man. I worked hard for my certificate, yet I got this job not because of my skills, but because of my wife's infidelity. Tears filled Miriam's eyes. I was just trying to help. Dyke sighed. Some help destroys more than it builds. Miriam wiped her face. So what happens now? Dyke finally looked at her. His gaze was calm but distant. I don't know, Miriam. I just need space to think. Her chest tightened. Are you leaving me? Dyke hesitated. I don't know, Miriam sobbed. Please don't give up on us. He exhaled deeply. I'm not giving up, but I can't promise that things will ever be the same. Miriam nodded slowly. I'll wait. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait. Dyke stood, grabbed his keys, and walked out. Miriam watched him leave, her heart heavy with regret. She had made her choice. Now, she could only pray that Dyke would one day choose her again. If you enjoyed this story, remember to share with your friends and family, comment and subscribe to this channel for more amazing stories.